Hello everyone, welcome to What If Deku Had Thor's Ability the God of Thunder Part 2. Part 11. We start off with Izuku and All Might at the top of the castle seeing a news helicopter arrive. The reporter get off the helicopter and ask Izuku, what was this thing? Izuku answers saying this is the castle of Asgard and I will be bringing the gods back, but don't worry it will only be temporary. The reporter then says oh that's okay, we just wanted to give people news that it was not a threat. After this the reporter leave and Izuku heads down in the city with his father to go on petrol. All Might wanted Izuku to get used to it and also that Izuku can find the hosts of the gods. For those who don't know, when the gods were dying, Odin created hosts for the gods all around Japan to help them come back to life early. While on petrol Izuku and All Might hear a radio dispatch asking for backup as an unstoppable beast has been tearing through the city. BTW it's nighttime. All Might and Izuku rush to that area and arrive to see a trail of destruction, buildings with All Might-sized holes in them, as if someone ran through them. At that moment they see a person as big as All Might run at them in some sort of armor. Izuku tries reading his mind, but is blocked out by the helmet. Izuku then tells All Might prepare to punch him. Both All Might and Izuku run at him with one for all and punch the villain, but the villain didn't even flinch as he just grabbed the two and threw them off. He then rammed All Might as All Might was trying to stand up. He then smashed All Might through buildings. Izuku seeing this places a barrier and extends it to be 2 kilometers in diameter. How this barrier works is that whoever Izuku doesn't want inside the barrier would be safely carried out of the barrier, as they will be covered by a smaller layer of barrier around them which can heal the injured. So people who were in the rubble and people who were going to get in the way were sent out, leaving only All Might, Izuku, the villain and pro heroes like Eraser and Endeavor. They then started fighting the villain, but to no avail. All Might and Izuku couldn't hurt him or hold him back with Black Whip. Endeavor had no effect with his fires, and Eraser could not cancel his quirk. The villain then says, I am the Juggernaut, the unstoppable villain, no one can defeat me. The news captured it. Izuku then calls his hammer replying, well let's try this. As he shoots lightning at Juggernaut, but he just walked through it. Izuku then hits the Juggernaut in the chest with Mjolnir, but was blown back by a shockwave created by the clash, as Juggernaut still did not stop. Now All Might runs behind the Juggernaut, and when he stopped he holds Juggernaut in a headlock and tells Endeavor to hit him. Endeavor starts hitting Juggernaut, who only laughed and was about to hit Endeavor, but suddenly All Might and Endeavor and Izawa were floating in the air and were covered in a layer of energy just like the barrier. As they saw Izuku stand up and spinning his hammer, he shouted, Juggernaut, let's see what happens when an unstoppable force meets an unmovable object. The people who were watching the news were scared, as many scientists had said that if theoretically an unstoppable force met an unmovable object, it would create a singularity and destroy everything. Izuku then charges Mjolnir with lightning, and as Juggernaut started running at him, he threw Mjolnir at him, and as the hammer and Juggernaut collide, everything except the Juggernaut, Izuku, Mjolnir and the 3 pros was vaporized inside the barrier. This is what the blast looked like, and when the smoke cleared, Juggernaut was lying on the ground and Mjolnir was hit backwards. So in this clash, the unstoppable force was stopped and the unmovable object was moved backwards. Everyone saw this, cheered as the villain was finally stopped. He then releases All Might, Endeavor and Izawa. Izuku also places Juggernaut in a rune cuffs, cutting his connection to the power to Sidorak. Izuku then lifts the barrier and calls Mjolnir to himself and used the earth manipulation to recreate everything that was destroyed. Basically he fixed all the houses and every item inside. Endeavor says, All Might, you have a good relationship with him. I wish I could have had the same relationship with my family. Izuku then looks at Endeavor and reads his memory and sheds a tear. He says, don't worry sir, I will help Shoto get on the right path, you just focus on being your true self. Endeavor then says, you will do that for me. Izuku says yes. Endeavor then hugs him saying thank you as he cried a bit. Izuku then says, now I had cut the footage of you hugging me, so now let's get the villain to Tartarus prison. They nod and take him to the guards who will take them back, and as the guards sees the runes they ask Izuku if this was another Rougeous guardian. Izuku says no, this was a human, but he somehow was channeling magical energy. The guard then says thank you for stopping him. Izuku says no, I only did what was right, and these guys also helped a lot, he said, pointing at the 3 heroes. The guard then walks off with Juggernaut and tells Izuku, be careful hero. This makes Izuku smile as he puts up a thumbs up. Then Izuku goes to his dad and says, Endeavor, can you do me a favor? Endeavor nods and asks, what do you need? Izuku says, if you ever have a run-in with Venom, don't use your fire, it's one of its weakness. Kid, I don't understand, why wouldn't I use my fire on him? Izuku replies saying, Venom is an alien symbiote who I let go to help us, as many more symbiote will arrive on this planet, and he can break them free from their king's control, and they can help us. Endeavor then says, alright, I won't go after him, but we will still put up a search party him as to make the villain seem we are after him, and to make the people think we are against vigilantes. Izuku says great and asks Izawa if he could get Venom a spot on the provisional license exam. Izawa nods and says, I will try to get him a spot with you guys. The exam would be 1 week after the sports festival. Izuku then says so good, I will contact him in the meantime and inform him about this. Then he flies off looking for venom. He searches the town and then the city of Mustafa, but he doesn't find anything, so he decides he will use the formula the night before the exam to look through the entire country. He then heads back home and sneaks in through the window, not wanting to deal with his mom right now. He sleeps and wakes up in the morning and looks at the table to see a terrified All Might and an angry Inko with floating hair. Izuku gulps as he walks forward. As he gets closer, his mother slaps him and pulls his collar saying, "Why did you sneak in last night? I was so worried about you." Izuku, trying to calm her down, hugs her and says, "Sorry mom, but I was tired and wanted to talk in the morning." Inko then lets go. Sand says, "So your mood is important than me?" Inko then has tears in her eyes. Izuku then goes on his knees and says, "That's not what I meant, I just wanted to get my mind clear before talking, please understand." Inko then stops crying as All Might comforts her. Inko then suddenly runs to the washroom and starts throwing up. She then comes out after finishing and whispers something in All Might's ears, which made All Might cry as he hugs her. Izuku then starting to felt like he is third wheeling, so sits down, eats at super speed and goes to his room, changes his clothes to his uniform, and leaves for school. While All Might and Inko dance slowly in the living room. Izuku then arrives at his classroom and enters it sitting beside Momo and greeting her. She greets back with a smile and keeps on looking at him. Izuku notices this and says, "You can watch me later, but now focus please." Momo does so as Izawa walks in and he says, "Problem children, today you will be selecting a class rep." Everyone cheers saying finally something normal. Izawa activating his quirk says, "Shut up. Now after you select the class rep, I want Izuku to train you guys for the sports festival, and people who don't want to be trained by Izuku can train themselves." The class nods. Izawa says good as he goes in his sleeping bag. The class then says that they should be the class rep, but suddenly Ida stands up and says, "We should vote to decide who the class rep are." Everyone says that's a great idea. After that they vote, and the person with most points is Izuku, followed by Momo. Bakugo stands up saying, "Who the hell voted for the damn nerd?" Izuku looks smiling and says, "Bakugo, calm down." But Bakugo says, "Whoever voted for the nerd, raise your hand." 17 students raised their hand except Izuku, Shoto and Bakugo. But after seeing everyone, Bakugo also raised his hand and said, "You thought I will actually be angry?" Izuku said, "I knew you were joking, that's the only reason you are here alive." Bakugo gulped at the response and stayed quiet. Then Izuku says, "So Shoto, you voted for Momo just like me, huh?" Shoto doesn't say anything and just ignores him. This causes everyone to look at Todoroki. Momo asks Todoroki, "Why did you vote for me?" Todoroki replied, saying, "You are the smartest here and an overall better candidate." Izuku with this goes towards Todoroki and whispers in his ear saying, "I know you are just looking for Momo's attention, but I am warning you, back off, she's with me." He then walks away, but Todoroki says, "We'll see about that." Izawa then, wanting to break tension, says, "Well, now whoever wants to be trained by Izuku, go to the training ground." Todoroki is the only one who refuses, so Izawa says, "Then you can go home and prepare for the festival. The next 2 weeks would be off, but those being trained by Izuku can come to the school ground now, class is dismissed." Izuku then says, "Okay, everyone except Momo go to the felid." They all leave except Momo, who asks Izuku, "Why did you ask me to stay?" Izuku says, "Stay away from Todoroki, his intention doesn't seem good to me, and also tomorrow I'll come to meet your parents." Momo says, "Finally I can tell dad about you." Izuku says, "Don't do that, let's surprise him and tell your mom to not say anything about me." Momo nods. Then they walk to the field. There Izuku told everyone to stand in a line next to one another. They all do so. Izuku then asks Ida to walk in front. Ida does so. Izuku then says, "I will give you this equation. It is called the Speed Force equation. It will make you unbelievably faster for a short period of time, as after you say it." Ida then questions, "What is the Speed Force?" Izuku then says that in the DC multiverse, a man named Barry Allen was struck by lightning, and due to some chemicals, an energy pool which spread throughout time and space, and it made its way to other multiverses as well. This allowed Barry Allen and other people to run at speeds far exceeding speed of light without and backdraws of physics. Now many people also got this ability by gaining a connection to Speed Force, and they draw energy from it, but Barry Allen generates the Speed Force when he runs, and I think you have the best chances of creating a direct connection to the Speed Force, so you would practice on that. Ida then says thank you and walks off while memorizing the Speed Force equation. Izuku then called up Tsu and told her that her tongue is 50 times stronger than a normal person's strength and said, "So if you cover your arms with our tongue, this will give you a huge strength boost in fights, so I want you to work on that." She then walked off and Izuku called Kaminari and Kirishima. He then told them both, "You both use your quirk at the fullest from the start, why not use smaller percentage?" So Kaminari, you could use a few volts instead of a million, and Kirishima, why don't you just focus all of your hardening at one spot, which is about to take the impact or the one which you will use to attack, you can stock all the hardening in one spot. Due to this, the two then walked away impressed by his idea. He then called Uraraka and said, Uraraka, I want you to try and change the direction of objects you touch. I know when you use your quirk, you want to make object float, so why don't you try to change their gravity to the side, causing them to fly off. You could also use this to fly, Uraraka said. I never thought of this, I need to work on this. Then she walks off. Then at the end Momo walks up too. Izuku then tells her, you need to know the molecular structure of an object and its functioning to make it, so here, take this. He said this as he placed his hand on her chest, not on the side but in the middle, and shares the omniscience about objects, allowing Momo to know the molecular structure of anything she wants to create. Then Izuku says, now just work on your timing and thinking, so let's play chess. The rest of the class was also helped by Izuku. We then skip to Endeavor going to meet his wife at the hospital. He walks in her room and is greeted by Rei Todoroki, who walks up to him and says, I am sorry. Endeavor just lifts her up and hugs her. Rei hugs Endeavor back, then he asks, so did the illness get cured? She says yes, then adds on saying, we can be a family finally. Okay, so guys, I am giving Rei an illness in this one, in which she would remember things incorrectly, and she herself suggested to be put in the hospital, as to not cause any harm to the children. Shoto was a bit affected by her illness and started to believe Endeavor hit her and was abusing them, but in fact Endeavor was just being a bit harsh as to prepare his children to be ready for the society and become people even greater than the No1 hero. This caused Shoto to think Endeavor was training them to surpass All Might. Now let's go back to the story. Rei returns home with Endeavor. Natsuo then speaks up saying, why are you with that abuser? Rei tells him not to speak to his father this way. Natsuo says, but he abused all of us in some way or another. Rei replies saying, no he didn't, I had an illness which made me think he did that. So it isn't his fault. Now apologize. Natsuo does so. Then they all talk and they make up. After that Shoto arrives and sees the thing. Endeavor tries making up to him, but Shoto says, I will put everything aside, but you have to help me do something. Endeavor says yes, anything. Shoto has a smirk on his face. We then cut to a blind man in an alleyway suddenly starting to glow and transform into Heimdall. The guard of the Bifrost. Heimdall has the ability to watch the entire universe. He can see anything that isn't hidden with magic. He makes his way to the new castle of Asgard, and when he arrives there he blows a horn. This grabs the attention of Izuku. As he flies up there he then sees Heimdall walk up to him. After getting a certain distance near Izuku, Heimdall kneels, putting his sword in a submissive manner, and says, my lord, I am Heimdall and I am at your service. Part 12. We start off at the next day with Izuku going over to meet Momo's parents. He flies to the main door and presses a button and says, I am Izuku Midoriya and I am here to meet Mr. and Mrs. Yaoi Rozu. The voice then comes from the speakers saying come in. Just as the gates open, Izuku quickly goes to the mansion and knocks on the door, which is opened by Momo, who greets him saying, you're finally here. Izuku responds with, sorry if I was late. Then, just as he was about to step in, he hears a voice familiar to him say, so I just sigh here and we're done. Izuku quickly realized who the person was and rushes past Momo using his full cowl into the room and sees Endeavor about to sign a paper. He quickly used Black Whip and his telekinesis quirk to stop Endeavor hand mere centimeters away from the paper. Endeavor quickly looks up to see who interrupted him and saw Izuku and asked Izuku, what are you doing here? Izuku just quickly sighs and says, sorry for stopping you, but what are you doing here? Endeavor, sensing worry in Izuku's voice, says, I am here to fix an arranged marriage between Momo and Shoto. Izuku then sighs and is happy and asks if that paper he was about to sign would have finalized everything. Endeavor replies saying yes, but why were you so worried? Izuku answers saying, me and Momo are dating and I warned Shoto about staying away yesterday, but looks like he didn't listen. Endeavor was shocked to hear this and stands up saying, I am sorry, I didn't know. Izuku smiling says, it's not your fault Uncle Enji. Just then Endeavor says, BTW, thank God you stopped me, because if I had signed that paper, it would have been impossible to cancel the marriage. Now, I am making it so that once both parties have agreed to an arranged marriage, it can't be undone. After that Endeavor left saying his goodbye to the family, but not before apologizing to Momo for his son's behavior. When Endeavor left, Momo's father stands up and walks over to Izuku and stands in front of him and introduces himself as Kina Yaoi Rozu and his wife as Meme Yaoi Rozu. Izuku almost laughed at the last part thinking who names their kid Meme, but was smacked on the head by Momo. Then Izuku bowed down and introduced himself by saying, it's a pleasure to meet you sir, I am your daughter's boyfriend Izuku Midoriya. Kini tells Izuku, who would have thought my future son-in-law will be the god of thunder and the son of the No1 hero himself. Izuku took it as a compliment and replied, well, I didn't think I would be able to find someone like your daughter in the entire universe, the other realms included. Kini just chuckled as he told Momo, I like the kid, why don't you show him around, I have to sort out the problem from earlier. Momo just said hi then walked off by dragging Izuku along the floor. The parent saw this and smiled, then went to talk. Kini first said, I think we should have 2 bodyguard to protect Momo from that Shoto kid, he seems obsessed with her, and make sure that they have quirks effective against his half hot quirk. Meme just nodded and said, I will interview people tomorrow morning. Now we cut off to Mama taking Izuku to her room. Of Momo, I closed the door behind me and told Izuku stand here while pointing near a table. Izuku said okay and stood there, then I took a deep breath and asked him something. Don't you think we are going too fast? And one more thing, since the day I met you, I never felt a doubt about anything with you. Normally people doubt themselves that they aren't deserving of the other and aren't good enough for will the other like them or not. Now I know you are doing something, just tell me what. Izuku looked at the floor and said, I am a god now, that means I will live for millions of years, meaning I only have about 50 to 60 years with you, right? I looked down and nodded. He then continued saying, so due to that I want to spend all of it with you as much as possible. I did not want to waste 1 month or something thinking about whether you deserve me or not. I did not want to waste time, so I removed the doubts from your mind and let you think freely. I instantly looked at him and I was angry. He had manipulated me, even though he was just removing self-doubt, but he was pushing me to just be with him. I told him something I knew I was going to regret. I told him to leave, and not I said, I need some time to think about this, but Izuku, don't think of this as in breakup, just a small break for me to adjust to this. Izuku looked up with tears in his eyes. He hugged me and said thank you. I thought you wanted to break up with me. I was taken aback, but then I just rubbed his back and said it's okay, but you need to go now. I have to think about it now. Let's put this relationship on pause until the final exams. Izuku just said yay sure, then he walked out and left. I then lied in my bed and thought, did I do the right thing? End of POV. Izuku was flying to Asgard to talk to Heimdall and possibly find more Asgardians. He then remembers last night. Flashback. Izuku was taken aback by Heimdall kneeling in front of him. Izuku quick got Heimdall up on his feet and asked, you're Heimdall, right? The guardian of Asgard, right? Heimdall looks up standing, says yes, and I was awoken in this body which Odin had created for us to come back, this time cheating death and breaking the cycle of Ragnarok. Izuku looks at Heimdall with a confused look and asks, what is the cycle of Ragnarok? Heimdall says Ragnarok is the foretold end of Asgard that occurs time after time during the reign of Thor. This event has happened countless times. Odin has been trying to prevent it ever since, but was always unable to, so this time he changed the role of Thor and brought everyone back differently. Izuku looks down saying interesting, I have to do some research about it. If I need more info I will ask you later, now I need to go. Heimdall looks at him and says yes my lord, then he stands at a ledge and looks over the UA campus and the city. Izuku then flies off to his house. End of flashback. Izuku arrives near the ledge where Heimdall was last night, only to find him gone. Izuku quickly thinks maybe he got into a fight. As Izuku was about to run away, he hears a person run to him with Asgardian armor, saying my lord, you are summoned by the king. Izuku quickly rushes through the halls to see that there are multiple people there. The entirety of Asgard was brought back seemingly overnight. When Izuku reached the throne room, he looked at the man sitting on the throne with a staff in his hand and an eye patch over one of his eyes looking down at him. This man was Odin, the All-Father. This is what he looks like. Now we skip over to a prison underwater covered by dragon-like creatures. The top of the prison was a rock circle in with a rune carved onto it. Inside the prison was a man who looked a lot like Odin, turning to look in a general direction and saying, oh so Odin has returned on Earth. This is the opportunity I have waited for years to arrive, and now it's time for me to take my place as the real All-Father. The man then started laughing maniacally and finishes his sentence by saying, the world shall know fear itself. This is what the man looked like. Part 13. You're Odin? asked Izuku. Yes, I am Odin. The All-Father answered Odin. Then Izuku was about to say something, but Odin waved his hand gesturing Izuku to stay silent. Izuku does so, then Odin speaks up saying, I am the king of Asgard until you turn 25 or reunite the 9 realms. Now on the topic, I can't stay on Earth, so you don't have to worry about the Asgardians being on Earth for long. I will leave as soon as the new Asgard is finished being built near Saturn, because as long as I stay here there will be problems. After a few seconds of silence, Izuku spoke up saying, what do you mean there will be problems? Odin looked up and then back at Izuku, saying, the serpent is an ancient being whom I had trapped many eons. Eons means thousands of years ago under the ocean, and now that I am here he has been awoken. Now believe me when I say you don't want to fight him. This scares Izuku a bit, but he steps up saying, if he breaks out I will do everything in my power to stop him. Do we have a deal? Odin then says, do as you please, but if the battle is a lost cause I will take you with me so we can at least have a last stand. Izuku nods and then looks back at Odin, who just says, you may leave now, you have a special class tomorrow, so go and do your thing. Izuku then walks out and flies out of the castle and arrives at his house. Upon entering, Izuku hears some crying from the kitchen and walks there to see his mom crying and All Might trying to console her. Izuku was about to say something, but he notices a pregnancy test kit on the counter. He walks up to it and looks at it and is shocked and angry upon seeing that it was positive. He then speaks up saying, so you came back after 14 years and under a year you get mom pregnant, wow, so take it you will take another 14-year leave after 9 months. Izuku says, a bit irritated and a bit happy that he will have a younger sibling. All Might and Inko turn back to see Izuku standing there and Inko is embarrassed and All Might is a bit scared and says my boy I will not leave okay. I did it that time because I was afraid, but now I know I don't need to be afraid and aren't you happy about the fact you will have a sibling? Izuku smiles and says yeah I am beyond excited I hope it is a girl, so she could be the flower girl in my and Momo's marriage. But then Izuku remembered what happened and looked down and whispers to himself, saying if that happens. All Might then says okay BTW who did your meeting with the Yaoi Rozu when Izuku responded with a sigh, then looking down almost starting to cry, saying, I bucked up dad I bucked up hard. All Might puts his hand under Izuku's armpit lifting them up. Okay it might sound weird, but I do this to someone when they are sad because when someone has responsibilities it is considered a weight on their shoulder, so putting the hand under someone's armpit and lifting them up indicates that you are lightening the weight. Then All Might says my boy what happened? Izuku then speaks up while wiping his tears, saying, Momo wants to take a break from the relationship she didn't tell me for how long, though All Might then hugs Izuku and asks, why did she do that? Izuku answers by saying well she asked me if our relationship was progressing too fast, and I replied that I had removed all the doubt and worry she had so she could quickly choose yes or no, as you know I will live for millions of years, so I wanted to spend as much time with her as possible, but she told me I played with her judgment. Izuku finished looking at All Might and All Might just stays silent. After a couple of seconds his mom speaks up she tells Izuku that what he did was wrong, he stole the free will she had you without a thought, made the choice for her, and didn't even let her think about it. It is just like controlling someone as soon as she had the thought of liking you, you didn't let her have any other thought, and that is not how I raised you. Izuku looks down in sadness and guilt, then says, I will apologize to her tomorrow. All Might then tells Izuku, BTW Izawa loved the shield you gave him, he said he wanted to test the shield against your strength at 100%, so why don't we pay him a visit in the forest he is already there, now come on it will also brighten your mood, All Might said with his trademark smile. Izuku nods then takes All Might with him after telling his mom they would be back in a couple of hours at maximum. Time skip to them meeting Izawa in All Might's forest. Took you long enough I was about to go sleep, says Izawa with a shield in his hand. The shield looks like this. Sorry we had a family issue Izuku says. Izawa sighs and says okay now I just came here to have this tested out so first try to break it by bending it with you full strength quirk and godlike. Izuku takes a breath and says as you wish then takes the shield and tries to crack or bend it with all of his power, but instead hurts his hand, only then lets go saying, that thing is truly quite durable, and now I want to hit it with Mew hammer to see what happens he then hands Izawa the shield and says hold it up here I come, he then jumps at Izawa and brings his hammer down striking the shield, but suddenly a big explosion occurs. Just like this, just avoid everything except the hammer hitting the shield. That was clearly something Kid Izawa says as he gets up with Izuku and All Might getting up holding themselves due to the shockwave they took point blank. Izuku says that is a good shield sensei now if you don't mind I would like to go home and sleep that blast gave me a concussion. Izuku then grabs All Might and teleports out leaving Izawa there who says this is awesome now let's take down some villains. He then goes to the city and does his job. Izuku and All Might just slept at home that night because they both had the concussion of their life. Time skip to next day. Izuku walks in class to see Shoto covered with bandages, possibly due to receiving beating from his mother and father. Izuku then notices a certain ponytail girl looking at him like she wanted to kill him. Izuku was feeling sad, but he was suddenly pushed by Izawa in the class. Izawa then speaks up saying okay listen here problem children, you will meet the big three of UA today, so behave or I'll suspend you. But that everyone stayed silent after 5 more seconds of silence Izawa says, you can come in now with that 3 students came into the room and then stood up. Izuku thought my first impression of them is that they have the entire circus here the blonde was the clown, the blue-haired was the announcer, and the third one who was like a less edgy elf Sasuke. Izuku knows that Sasuke exists in a different multiverse, was that one guy in the group who does all the work but is too afraid to speak up. They then introduce themselves as Mirio Tagada, Nijire Hato and Tamaki Akajimi. I hope this is his name. Then Tamaki says his I want to go home line after that Mirio speaks up saying okay, so that's that now let's fight you all against me. The class erupted, saying that it is a bad idea, but Izawa cuts them off saying, just do it okay, and Todoroki will not participate in this exercise due to his injuries now move it. The class make their way to the gym, and they all get in a fighting position and get ready to battle it out, and just as soon as Izawa says go Mirio disappears into the floor. The only two who saw what happened were Ida and Izuku, since they both have super speed, so they also have slow motion vision by default. Izuku was pissed at what he saw all of Mirio's clothes were on the ground and he was about to flash a girl, so Izuku searched around until he saw Mirio's head pop up from in front of Momo. Izuku quickly rushed there and kicked him in the face, sending him flying and seemingly knocking him out with one blow, sending him in the forest type area and put his clothes there as well. Now this all happened under a nanosecond, so Mirio didn't even know Izuku was coming to attack him. Izawa then speaks up saying Midoriya, why did you knock him out so quickly? Izuku just turns to him and says, well, he was about to flash my girlfriend, so I kicked him out of the gym and into the trees and left his clothes with him. Hearing this, Momo jumps on Izuku and kisses him on the cheeks and says thank you Izu, but suddenly lets go and walks away angrily saying, I didn't need your help you bastard, and walked away. The entire class was surprised, even Izawa was seeing how they were inseparable until today. He wondered what happened yesterday to change them so much. But among the faces of confusion there were two faces of happiness, one being Izuku and other being Todoroki. Izuku puts his hand on his cheeks and slowly whispers, I am still worthy of her love, and smiles to himself. Meanwhile, Todoroki has a shit-eating grin on him, thinking finally, I can have her. And oh, trust me you bastard, I will make her happy, I will give her the life of her dreams, I will lay down my life for her, I will love her like a queen, and I will always make her happy unlike you. After that Mirio came back holding his jaw and asked Izuku, why did you kick me so hard? Izuku replied with a scoff and said, you were about to flash every girl here, if I wanted I could have filed a report against you with you being a hex offender and in jail, so next time use your hero costume for something like this. Mirio then asked for forgiveness from everyone saying, I was just too excited to fight you all, I have heard amazing things from the teachers. Everyone forgives him after a while, and then they all ask the question that was on their mind, saying Midoriya, what was that with Momo? And you? Izuku replied saying I messed up, and now we are on a break, but she didn't say break up and even kissed me today. So I think we will come back after some time. The shippers then sighed and said, the iceberg hit the ship, but the ship survived. Oh thank God. This made Izuku laugh with his friends, finally actually happy since the incident yesterday. Now on with the serpent. A few people were swimming down to the rune-shaped tomb guarded by sea dragons. The crew began fighting them. One of them burned 3 dragons with his blue flames. This was a man with black trench coat and his body covered with burnt skin. The other was a girl who let herself get eaten by a dragon and then started to attack the dragon from the inside, killing it. The girl then came out and revealed herself to be a girl with blonde hair and 2 bangs. The last man being a person covered in hands who decayed 2 dragons with both hands. Then the group of 3 went to the seal, and the man covered in hands touched the seal, decaying it and opening the tomb, and they all went inside to be greeted by old man. The old man looked at them and said, ah Shigaraki, Dabi and Toga, nice to meet you, I was waiting for you all. Shigaraki and the crew then take off the swimming gear and Shigaraki speaks up saying, you contacted me telling you had a gift for us and you wanted us to work for you. The serpent then says, yes, that is what I intended. Now listen, I am much more stronger than Afo, so listen, you work for me and you will have the entire world because I have the power to do it, and as per your recruitment you will be given a hammer similar to the one which belonged to Thor but different at the same time. Now do you accept? Shigaraki, tempting at the thought of ruling the world with actual godlike powers, said yes, I would love to work for you. The serpent smirks and says, then all 3 of you pick your hammers, while pointing to the hammers in the room. Shigaraki then goes to the hammer in the middle and stretches his hand nearing the hammer as black energy comes off from the hammer. Meanwhile Toga's hammer gives off red energy, meanwhile Dabi's hammer gives off white energy. And as soon as they lift the hammers they are suddenly transformed into something else. They look something like this but with their normal self. Part 14. It was the last day before the sports festival. Izuku was sitting on his rooftop and meditating. He had been trying to access float, which was Nana's quirk. He wanted to use it as a backup if he ever needed to use both hands, while mid-air as Mjolnir requires one hand to hold it to fly. All Might came back up to the roof after he went to get a couple of drinks, a beach chair, some sun cream. When he arrived, he saw Izuku floating a bit above ground. It was about half an inch to be exact. All Might called out to Izuku saying good progress. This caused Izuku to end his meditation and fall down, but it wasn't much, so he just stood up and said, well, enjoy your sunbathing, I have some places to be. With that he said something under his breath and sped off, leaving trail of green lightning behind him. All Might then sees the same lightning everywhere throughout the city and is confused and thinks if he was using Ofa, there would be wind pressure from the drag his body will generate, but there is none. It's like the air is not affecting him. I guess I will ask him later. Little did he know that Izuku was using the speed force to travel multiple times faster than light without experiencing any drag or setting off explosions. He went throughout the country, then he got bored, so he decided to go to the sun to check out his durability. It is said if you travel at a certain speed the air particles in front of your body will not have enough time to move and will get supercharged, and when they have enough charge they will cause a nuclear explosion. Time skip. When Izuku reached the sun, Izuku lands on the surface and immediately sinks in, then he flies back out and says of course the sun is made up of plasma and plasma is liquid energy, you can't stand on it, but still I didn't receive any damage, so I can survive a trip to the core of the planet easily. That is awesome. Now I think I should go to every planet, then go and look for Venom, pretty sure he would come out at night time. Izuku then did just that, he explored the entire solar system. He also found something shocking near Saturn. He decided to check it out. He arrived at the structure and saw that there were people working there to build something. He landed there and was met by some workers who came to him and bowed down. Izuku was confused until he saw Asgardian armor, and then he put two and two together and asked, "This is the new Asgard which Odin has ordered to be constructed, right?" One of the workers stood up and said, "Yes, my lord, it is." Izuku then said, "Good, well, sorry for interrupting you, I was just passing by, and no need to call me lord, Izuku is fine." The workers then all stood up and said, "Very well, Izuku." Izuku gave them a smile and said, "Well, I must leave, I have to talk to a person. I hope you guys have a fun time working, and if you need any help just call me." The workers nodded, and with that Izuku flew towards Earth and landed in a city where Venom was last seen. Izuku turned into his normal self. He was wearing a mask just like everyone reading this should while going outside. He then started walking in the city, looking for any sign of Venom. He was walking rapidly until he heard his phone ringing. He saw that it was an unknown number, but decided to pick it up and said, "Who's this?" He got a grumpy voice replying saying, "It's Endeavor, I got your number from All Might, come to my location, I have him." Izuku just to make sure asks, "Just to be clear, we are talking about the same him, right?" Endeavor just replies with, "Yay. Now come to my location." Izuku then sees the location Endeavor sent him and flies there. He arrives to see Endeavor with Ingenium and a man he doesn't recognize. Meanwhile, the police was taking someone away. Izuku walks up to the unknown man and asks, "Are you Venom?" The man turns and replies, "Yes, I am Yashi Yahaka, also known as Venom." Izuku then says, "Nice to meet you, Yashi, BTW, who did the police take away?" Ingenium then speaks up saying, "Oh, it was Stain, the hero killer, he attacked me." But before he could do any damage, Venom came and stopped him. Izuku turned to Yashi and said, "Really? I want to know how you did it. Can you tell me?" And BTW, what is your quirk, Izuku? As he pulled out his hero analysis No.13 notebook and a pen from his wristbands. Yashi gave a chuckle at Izuku's enthusiasm and said, "I don't have a quirk, and as for your question on how I beat him, well, Ingenium can tell the part before I arrived, and I will tell everything that happened after. Is that good enough?" Izuku smiles and says, "Absolutely." Storytelling. Ingenium's POV. I was doing my early night petrol as usual when I saw a figure atop a rooftop and decided to check it out because I thought maybe it was Venom, and Endeavor had asked us if we ever found Venom we asked him to contact Izuku. So I did just that. I ran up the building and reached the top and went to talk to the figure, but before I could do anything the figure attacked me with a knife. I was able to dodge it. It was at that point I realized that the figure was actually Stain. He told me, another fake hero who came to die. Don't worry, I will cleanse this society from the likes of you, Vame Horse." With it he attacked me rapidly and didn't give me a chance to get my balance back. It wasn't late before I was at the edge of the building. I panicked and he used that to attack me and hit me off the roof. Both him and I fell in this alleyway. I was stunned after falling from a height, so I was trying to catch my breath, but Stain had already landed on me and was ready to stab me. But it was at that moment where Venom arrived. Venom's POV. I was jumping around looking for some people to take care of. It was peaceful until I heard a crash and decided to check it. I was on a rooftop, looking over the alleyway. I just looked down and saw that it was the hero Ingenium in danger. I called the cops and told them, "Sir, this is an emergency. Pro hero Ingenium is fighting the hero killer and is losing. Please send someone to help him. You can track my phone to get here." He said this mid-air while Venom had jumped down just as Stain was about to bring his sword down and shot some webs towards him, sticking to his sword and pulling him in for a kick to the face, which would have been able to knock out most, but Stain was surprisingly tough. He landed back and said, "You're Venom, right? You're one of the real ones. You are helping people unlike this fake." I looked at him with a disgusted look behind my mask and said, "Who are you calling fake? Ingenium helps people without a care about himself, and he also supports vigilantes who wants to help people. I think you should look at people before you make an opinion." With it I jumped at Stain and made a hammer from my body and attacked him, which he dodged, and that is exactly what I wanted. I used a tentacle from my shoulder to grab him and smash him between the walls multiple times, but don't worry, I was keeping his head secure so he won't have any brain damage. After a while I stopped because he was knocked out. I out him down and was going to capture him, but he sprung at me suddenly and stabbed me in the shoulder and quickly pulled the knife out and licked it. Just as he did that my body fell numb and I couldn't move. He tried to cut my head clean off with a slash of his sword, but luckily Venom moved my body on his own. Stain was quite surprised by this and said, "You can move even after being paralyzed. You really are something. I won't kill you if you leave right in." But before he could finish he was kicked in the back of the head by Ingenium, who was waiting for the perfect moment to catch Stain off guard and knock him out. Venom then moved my body and webbed Stain up. Then I was about to run away, but Ingenium called out to me and said, "Izuku wants to meet you, just wait." I tried to run away, but Venom brought me down and said, "Don't panic, Izuku is the one who released me, so he must have something important to say." After that I stayed here. Then Endeavor arrived and we introduced ourselves, and while the police were taking Stain away Izuku arrived. End of storytelling. So what can I do for you, asked Yoshi. Izuku looked at him and said, me and my class will be taking the provisional license exam next week. I have already got you a spot on the exam. This will make you a proper pro hero. Hearing this, Yoshi started crying. His dream was coming true. He will finally be a true hero. He wiped his tears and looked at Izuku and said, thank you, I promise I will do my best. Izuku smiled at him and said, looking forward to working with you. With that, Izuku went to his house to sleep because the sports festival was the next day. Time skip. When Class 1A was in the lockers, Izuku was changing his clothes until he felt two people behind him. He turned around to find Momo and Todoroki. Todoroki first spoke up saying, listen, even if you are a god I will defeat you, make Momo mine, and I will do this with only my right side to prove to that burning piece of garbage that I am better than his flames. Momo then spoke up saying, first of all I will never be yours daddy issues, and secondly listen here you little shit, while pointing at Midoriya, I will beat your ass to a pulp and win this festival, and I will not go back on my word. Izuku just looked at Shoto with hatred and said, kindly buck off. Then he turned to Momo and looked at her with sorry eyes and said, I'm sorry, please give me another chance. Momo just sighed and said, we will talk this out at a cafe after I win the festival. Izuku just smiled and nodded. Then they heard Midnight calling everyone out onto the field. The same stuff as anime happens until the start of obstacle race. Izuku was using full cowling at 50% and was in a running position as soon as Midnight said go. Izuku leapt out of the tunnel, and just as he got out Todoroki too went out of the tunnel while freezing everyone behind him. He was grinning and Izuku was having fun running until he heard the announcement in which Midnight said, the first person to cross the finish line is Iida Tensei and the person in second place is Momoyao Irozu. Hearing this, Izuku got a little agitated that he didn't get first and nor second, so he called his hammer and started running at super fast speeds and reached the finish line in a matter of just 1 second, and he ran so fast that the ground was torn by his speed. Seeing this, Todoroki was furious. He too decided to go into top gear and started creating ice at a much faster rate, getting himself fourth and Bakugo in fifth. The moment Izuku crossed the finish line, he went straight to Momo and asked, how did you get second? Momo just whistled and then said, I'll show you later. With it, she walked off. When 32 people crossed, the race was ended and the top 32 were brought together and told that the next competition will search and destroy. This one had simple rules. There will be 2 teams of 16 players each. No quirks were allowed. Students were told they can only use weapons provided by the school. The weapons were assault rifles, snipers, light machine guns, pistols, rubber knives, rubber frag grenade, concussion grenade. Students could choose 1 primary weapon, 1 secondary, 1 lethal and 1 tactical. The red team was a bunch of extras. Blue team had Izuku, Achako, Momo, Tokoyami, Kirishima, Bakugo, Shoto, Iida, Tetsutetsu and finally Shinso. Shoto walks up to his team and says, listen, I know we are not on speaking terms, but this thing depends on teamwork, so we should put aside our difference for some time. Izuku smiled and said, I agree with it. Everyone else also agreed. Then Midnight spoke up saying, okay kids, to win the bombers, either have to plant a bomb on either side A or side B and defend it until the bombs explode. And the defenders have to defuse the bombs. You can also win by killing every opponent, and whoever reaches 5 points first wins. 1 round is worth 1 point. The kill with R, you have to do 2 headshots or 5 torso shot or 10 leg shots, and as for sniper, it is 1 shot 1 kill. Izuku then smiles and says, okay guys, I am taking a sniper and I am killing them all. Everyone was spectacle and about to say something, but Bakugo stopped them and said, let him go, he's a pro at this because he was a late bloomer. He trained with guns to protect himself. Hearing this, everyone agreed to let Izuku so the dirty work and just stay at the start. And after that, Midnight had announced the blue team the winners and all 16 had advanced to the final round, which was decided to be 1v1. Izuku looked at the screen and said, this is it, Part 15. This is where the fun begins, Izuku said after the announcement and saw that his first match will be against Shinso, after that he will have to face Shoto, and after that he will fight Iida, who will be a tricky opponent. Izuku got ready and walked to the room which was given to him to rest and prepare for the matches. After 15 minutes of waiting, Izuku was summoned to the arena to fight Shinso. He got there ready to fight Shinso, but before he could even move, Shinso decided to say something that being, it must be nice being the son of the No. 1 hero and having the powers of a god. You must be enjoying your life from the get-go, having a life full of riches and whatnot. Meanwhile, I was labeled as a villain just because I had a quirk which people didn't like it. Izuku was getting angrier because he had also gotten Thor's temper as well. He replied to Shinso saying, really well, let me tell you something, I lived my life without a father for 14 years and lived as a quirkless who was bullied for 12 years. You say you had a rough childhood, well so did I, so I understand how you must feel. but using that to gain sympathy, that is just low-class move. Shinso was shocked and said, "Why isn't my quirk working? You should have been under my control right now. How are you still free from my control?" Izuku just chuckled and said, "Well, I did some training to block telepathic attacks, so you've already lost with it." He ran at Shinso and pushed him out of the arena and said, "You can improve and prove others wrong, but only if you try." He said this while offering a hand, which Shinso took, happily agreeing to what Izuku had said. Now it was the match between Shoto and Shiro. Nothing major. Shoto won by creating a big-ass iceberg. Then Momo and Takayami's match, where just as Midnight said go, Momo created a lightsaber and attacked Dark Shadow, who could do nothing against a lightsaber which was hot and bright. Momo with this ran towards Takayami while fending off Dark Shadow. When she reached Takayami, she put the lightsaber to his throat as she said, "Do you yield?" Takayami just said, "I yield." With that, Momo advanced to the next round where she would fight Mina. Bakugo also advanced after beating Uraraka and also won his match against Kirishima. Now it was the most awaited match between Izuku and Shoto. They both walked on the arena and got ready for the fight, but before they started, Izuku said something with a smirk, "Use your full power, Todoroki, you can't win otherwise." Shoto just shouted "shut up" while sending a wave of ice at Izuku, who broke it with a single flick and almost pushed Todoroki off the arena. Shoto was angry. He shouted saying, "Why are you interfering in my life, taking away the girl I love? I want to make her happy." "Unlike you," Izuku just looked at Shoto and said, "She loves me, she is happy with me, so shouldn't you be happy that she is happy?" Shoto looked down and it hit him hard that all he was doing was ripping her away from a person she loves, so he looks at Momo in the crowd and says, "I am sorry, Momo." Then he looked at Izuku, who looked like he wanted to say something, so Shoto spoke saying, "You want to say something? I'll say it, I will listen." Izuku smiled and said, "Well, I wanted to say was that you should not hate your father, even though he treated you badly, he only wanted you to be stronger so you could." Before he could finish, Shoto said, "Surpass All Might, right? He is putting his ambition on me. I don't want to be what he wants me to be." Izuku looked at Shoto and said, "He wants you to surpass All Might because he is the strongest hero and the strongest can protect those close to them and save others as well. He wants you to be stronger than All Might because when he was a kid he lost his family to a villain and he wasn't strong enough to save them. That is why he wanted to be the strongest, because he thought that the strongest never loses and always protects people." Hearing this, Shoto looked back at his father with tears in his eyes and he could see his father tear up as well. Shoto then looked back at Izuku and said, "Midoriya, you sure are a hero, saving me from a wrong path. Fine, I would use my fire because it is not his, but mine, right?" Izuku just smiled and said, "Read my mind." Shoto then fired a lot of ice, covering the floor with only ice. Izuku saw this and smirked, thinking this is good. When he launches his fire, the hydrogen particles in the ice would supercharge and explode. This will give me an opening to read every mind in the stadium to find who the traitor is, as the explosion would distract them and leave their mind vulnerable to a mind read. But that Shoto charged his fire, condensing it, and Izuku charged lightning in his body with Ofa at 100%, and they both were ready to attack each other as friends, going all out. This scared Midnight, who told Cementos to create pillars, but as soon as the two launched their attack, breaking the pillars, and Shoto's fire did just as Izuku predicted, and in an instant he read everyone's mind and found the traitor, saying, "There you are." Then he went through the fire doing nothing to Izuku, as the only thing fire can do is burn, it can't push an object back. But this Izuku walked through it and punched Todoroki in the guts, launching him out of the arena and said, "GG Todoroki." Todoroki was knocked out and Izuku was standing on the arena and the crowd was going wild, saying the top two heroes' kids are just as good as them, if not better. This made both Endeavor and All Might proud. After watching this, Momo was fuming with anger that how calmly he fought. This was the moment she decided that she would ruin him and make him regret his life. The next match was Bakugo versus Momo. The crowd was worried for the girl as they had seen how Bakugo fights. But that was soon changed when they heard what Momo said when she walked on the arena. She said, "Listen here, you little shitty Pomeranian, if you hold back in this fight you will lose your balls, you understand? I will shoot them off, then I will cut your hick off and cook it and feed it to you as a hot dog." Understood. Itsuki nodded at super fast speed. Now the crowd was afraid of what will happen to the boy. Midnight was about to say begin, but Bakugo stopped her and said, "I will be right back." He went in the tunnel, and he came back after 5 minutes ready to fight. He then walked out and said, "Now I am ready." Midnight asked him, "Where were you?" Bakugo just said, "I was jerking off just in case I lose my hick." Everyone was surprised and Midnight said, "Thank you for your honesty, now fight." But that Momo ran towards Bakugo at blinding speeds and punched him in the guts. Then she grabbed his collar and threw him into the arena and said, "Get up." Her hearing the or Bakugo got up really fast and prepared to fight and started making small pops in his hands and said, I won't hold back Yaoi Rozu. Momo just smirked and said good for you. Bakugo then rushed at her, but was before he could attack her, he felt a large amount of pain in his guts. He looked down to see blood dripping out of his stomach and Momo's hand inside his stomach. He looked at her as he coughed up blood and said, I am sorry if I offended you in any way ma'am. Hearing this Momo pulled her hand out, then cleaned the blood off of her hand and put her hand near his stomach. Bakugo was afraid that she would pull out an organ, but much to his surprise, a green light came from her hand as she healed Bakugo. Bakugo stood up grabbing his stomach and heavily breathing. He then looked at Momo and gulped. After that he turned towards the exit and ran out of the arena. He didn't care about his pride, his life was more important right now. The crowd were scared but most notably Izuku, because she hurt Bakugo like that, only because he was Izuku's best friend, so what would happen to Izuku himself? Izuku quickly ran away to his room to prepare for the fight with Iida. His only bet against Iida was the Speed Force or some ruins. He was brainstorming ideas until he found the perfect one. He then heard Midnight call his and Iida's name. They both arrived on the arena and prepared to fight. Midnight yelled fight. With that Iida was about to say the Speed Force formula, but was cut off by Izuku grabbing Iida's mouth at super speed and slamming him into the ground, winning the match instantly. Izuku stood up looking at everyone and said, I am sorry that this match was so boring, but I couldn't risk Iida getting that power boost otherwise I would have lost. I am sorry my friend. Iida just laughed and said, no problem, I understand, and I am quite happy you won. The crowd was confused, and so was Izuku, who questioned Iida by saying, why. Iida had a sweat run down his face as he said, well, I didn't want to fight Yaoi Rozu. Given how angry she is, she probably wants to fight you. Good luck, and if you survive we will meet again. But that Iida left Izuku there as Midnight asked Izuku, hey kid, you ready for the next round? Izuku, who didn't pay attention, just nodded. A mistake he will regret. Seeing Izuku nod, Midnight asked Momo to come down to the arena. Izuku this time heard what she said and said, wait, what, right now? Midnight just looked at Izuku and said yes. Momo then came onto the arena and Izuku just prayed to God, any god, to save him. But he only heard one thing, I am sorry buddy, but is too good to miss out on now. Tadic. Izuku was like, oh come on Vinay, please, you are the only one who can help me right now. The now known Vinay said, nah, I will enjoy this with popcorn. Izuku got angry and said, book you man, but he then heard a voice from the stand say that to my face, you idiot. Vinay looked over to the stands, finding Vinay standing there with popcorn in his hands, and Izuku gulped and said, I am sorry sir, please forgive my rudeness. Vinay just smiled and said, I will only accept this apology when you will fight her. Izuku was now scared, but he decided that he needed to face Momo, and that was the only option here. He looked at her and said, Momo, I am sorry, please understand, I did it because I love you. This pissed Momo beyond compare and she said, so you've chosen death with that. Midnight said go. And Momo rushed at Izuku with swords and guns slinging, which forced Izuku to be on the back foot, who was only dodging because her swords and bullets were made of Yuru, which could hurt Izuku and possibly kill him if it hit him in the right place. Izuku was looking for an opening, and when he found it, he decided to rush and gut punch Momo at 50% OFA, which to his surprise, didn't do anything as she just grabbed his face and punched him, causing him to spit up blood. Unknown to everyone, Momo had learned a unique thing during her training, she had learned how to create quirks. Now you may ask, well, quirks are non-living things, so yeah, she learned how to do that. And do you know if you cut off an arm, the arm is no longer considered living, so Momo can create body parts and quirks, except for quirks like Dark Shadow. Izuku was flying back, but he landed on his feet after doing a somersault and jumped up, but was hit by an explosion which came from Momo, as she had created Bakugo's quirk, and Izuku was pushed back in the air. As he looked down, he only found Momo covered in smoke. He then took the chance to push himself towards her by punching the air behind him, but much to his surprise he saw something come at him. It was an axe possibly made of Yuru. He couldn't dodge it and was hit in the chest with it. He fell to the ground. Still in the arena, he was wincing in pain as Momo walked towards him and kneeled down to meet him at eye level and said, are you sorry? Izuku quickly nodded and said, Momo, I am really sorry, please forgive me. Momo then sadistically said, apology accepted, as she pulled the axe out and kissed him saying, and I love you too. She had returned to her normal self after kissing him. She stood up and said, man, that was tiring acting like that. Izuku, who was healing slowly on his own, said, you were acting. Momo just smiled and pushed Izuku, making him fall out of the arena, claiming victory for herself. Meanwhile, on the other side of the country, the Juggernaut was working out in a special dome which had runes on the walls which cut his connection to Sidorak, so he couldn't be unstoppable, and was surrounded by guards who were his friends by now. Suddenly a large boom was heard as something crashed through the dome in front of them. It was a hammer with a long handle, and the hammer head was round and could be used from both sides. The Juggernaut was called by the hammer. He didn't want to go to it, he was resisting the temptation because he had realized that he was wrong, but the hammer then started to pull himself towards him, and when he reached the hammer, he was struck by lightning as he was turned into something else. He then said, the world shall now live in fear as my master is fear itself. Part 16. Izuku was standing on the second podium and Iida on the third, while Momo was standing on the top, and Midnight was saying, well done students, you all did well. All the teachers are proud of you, and now the medals will be given to you by. But she was cut off by something falling out of the sky, saying, by me. Of course everyone in the stadium who wasn't a pro or a student said, it's All Might. All Might then was about to say something, but Midnight hit him in the back saying, never cut me off ever again. All Might just looked at Midnight while holding his hands in a defensive position, said alright I get it. He then walked over to the medals and grabbed the third place medal, and stood in front of Iida and said, young Iida, I am proud of you for achieving third place, and fighting with your everything you got, but don't get hockey because there is always something you can learn. But that he put the medal on Iida, and then picked the second medal and stood in front of Izuku and said, ah my boy, you really are my son. I guess losing a fight to the girlfriend is like a family thing. I am proud of you for achieving second place. With that he put the medal on Izuku's neck and looked at the crowd who were laughing. All Might just sighed and took the first place medal and stood in front of Momo and said, well done young Yaoi Rozu, you won the first year sports festival against really strong opponents. This only prove how talented and strong you are. With that he put the medal on her neck, then turned to the crowd and said, everyone let's say it together. The crowd and All Might then yelled, plus ultra you did a great job. The crowd then booed at All Might, and All Might while rubbing the back of his head said, I mean they did a great job, now I think I should G. But before he could jump away, two hammers landed in the middle of the stadium and started giving off energy. Izuku saw the hammers and quickly connected the dots and yelled, don't touch them, they are dangerous artifacts. But before he could say more, he heard two voices say, Izuku Midoriya, it is pulling me towards it. Izuku quickly looked to his left, seeing Todoroki and Bakugo being pulled towards the hammers. Izuku froze up and could only yell no, but it was too late. The two had reached the hammers and were transformed into two creatures. The green one is Bakugo, while the rock one is Todoroki. The two transformed students looked around them and said, ah, it feels good to finally be back in the world of the living, and now they ended the chat while looking at Izuku and said, you who wield the hammer Mjolnir, we challenge you to a fight. Izuku was breathing heavily as to what would happen, but he felt a hand on his shoulders as he looked at the person whose hand was on his shoulder and said, thanks Momo. He then heard Shoto say, what, you afraid? Momo then said, don't worry, just stop them. Izuku then looked back at the two and said, I accept. With it the two rushed at Izuku, who quickly rushed at them and yelled, no one will interfere, and called his hammer and jumped at the two saying, do I look afraid to you, and hit Shoto in the face, sending him flying towards the city. Then he blocked a punch from Bakugo and turned back saying, evacuate the city. He then hit Bakugo with lightning and then sent him flying in the same direction as Shoto and was about to go after them, but something broke through the wall and he looked to the wall, seeing the Juggernaut in possession of a similar hammer and said, guys, can you handle him? Every hero and the class 1A and 2A students said yes we can. Now you go after them. Izuku then nodded and flew after Bakugo and Shoto. He landed 15 blocks away and found that the two of them had already started rampaging through the city, so he quickly put up a barrier which could carry people outside the barrier and also healed everyone. Then he went after the two and found them wreaking more havoc and said, did you forget I am your opponent? The two then said, ah, so you didn't run after all, we were wrong about you. Now are you ready to fight? Izuku just tightened his grip on his hammer and said, as I ever will be. With that he threw the hammer towards Bakugo, but Bakugo just let it went past him and rushed at Izuku and tried to hit him in the head with the hammer by bringing it down in a swing, but Izuku blocked it with his hands. It was a little difficult for him, but he then pushed Bakugo back, but suddenly Izuku had a voice say, forgot about me. He turned around to find Shoto there. Izuku was caught off guard and was hit in the stomach with the hammer and was now bleeding. But Izuku called Mjolnir to himself and said, now I am pissed off. With it he rushed at Shoto and hit him in the side of the stomach, sending him flying. Then he went to Bakugo, who tried to punch Izuku, but Izuku just dodged it by letting it go past his face and then hit Bakugo in the chin, sending him flying upwards and knocking him out. Izuku then looked back at Shoto and said, what you done already? Shoto then said, you are getting cocky and egoistic like the blonde over there. Izuku hearing this said, as if I would fall down to such levels. I am better. With that Izuku ran at Shoto, but something grabbed him by the collar from behind and threw him into a gas truck which exploded. Izuku then came out of the truck to see Bakugo there and said, all right Bucket, I will just kill you, then bring you back normally. Hearing this Shoto ran at Izuku saying, do you really think so highly of yours? But before he could finish he felt sharp pain in his chest as he saw Mjolnir flying to Izuku with blood on it. As Izuku caught it he looked at Shoto collapsed in the street. He then said I liked it little because he had a reason to be arrogant, but you have been a pain in the ass without a reason. With that Izuku ran at Bakugo and Bakugo was preparing himself for the attack, but Izuku was too fast and hit him in the chin, sending him into the 5th floor of a nearby office building and soon followed him and rushed at him, throwing him out on the other side of the building. And as he was called lightning, as Izuku was falling closer to Bakugo he said, and now you die. He hits Bakugo in the ground creating a Serator. Well, Zero just arrived at the scene, But Izuku didn't pay attention to him and fell near Bakugo. He then stood up saying, "You pant no I could pant never pant beat you." Bakugo stood up and while walking towards Izuku said, "I know." Izuku then called his hammer and charged it saying, "Oh did you now?" and hit Bakugo in the face ending the battle. Izuku was then walking away after beating Bakugo and said, "We will meet again Bakugo," and as he was walking away he saw Shiro coming to him and Izuku said, "Shiro, how are you here? Didn't I put a barrier in this area? And what happened to the Juggernaut?" Shiro was looking around anxiously trying to form words. He calmed himself down and said, "The Juggernaut was taken care of." Kirishima was able to somehow take the abilities of the Juggernaut, but suddenly we heard a voice say, "Go to Izuku. I was the first to reach this place as Iida, Yayoi Rozu, Endeavor, and All Might are currently knocked out." Izuku with a shocked face said, "I see." Then Shiro looks around and says, "BTW, where are the two of them?" Izuku looks at Shiro with a look of guilt and sadness and unease, saying, "I had to kill them, but we can revive them later." Just then Izawa arrives and says, "Problem child. There is someone coming, you should leave." But before Izuku or anyone else could do anything they felt a huge pressure in the atmosphere and saw a portal near them and a voice from the portal saying, "So this is the wielder of the hammer." The man then walked out revealing himself saying, "I am the serpent, the true all-father." "Well, you are just children with your childish games." Behind him were Shigaraki, Toga and Dabi and many other powerful villains such as Nine and his team who were transformed into creatures like Bakugo and Todoroki. Izawa then said, "Everyone stay back. Izuku, you have to get out of here." Izuku was about to say something, but Izawa ran at the serpent and the serpent just smirked and snapped his fingers and a hammer was thrown by Dabi towards Izawa, who in defense raised his shield which blocked the attack and the serpent smirked saying, "Vibranium, the second most durable object in the universe, but still it is nothing." He then raised his hand towards Izawa and pulled the shield away from him, then he held the shield up and said, "A vibranium shield like this can take a supernova, so now let me show you how strong I am." He then broke the shield with his bare hands. This not only broke the shield, but also broke the will of people there because even Izuku at his 100% couldn't break it. But Izuku still had to save his friends, so he rushed at the serpent, but the serpent just punched Izuku in the gut, knocking him out and rupturing some organs. And the serpent was about to kill Izuku, but a blast sent him backwards. He without looking up, said, "Ah Aden, so you came here yourself." But he heard a reply that shocked him as well. He heard a female voice say, "I am not Aden, my name is Melissa Shield, and you sir are trespassing on this planet." She was in her suit which she had designed. The serpent then rose up saying, "What a pesky attempt, now suffer." He then charged a blast ready to kill them all and fired it, but just before the blast could hit the people there disappeared and the serpent heard a voice, "I will see you soon in the battlefield, brother." The serpent smirked and said, "Oh, I will be waiting for you, Aden, or shall I say my dear old younger brother." End of chapter. Part 17. 10 minutes before the serpent arrived, Izuku looked at the everyone and said, "Guys, can you handle him?" Every hero and class 1A and 1B student said yes, we can now go after them. Izuku nodded and flew after Bakugo and Shoto. Then the class focused their attention on the Juggernaut and Momo said, "Iida, can you still use the speed force?" Iida then replied, "No, I can't, I am out of stamina for it." Momo then cursed under her breath and said, "Range fighters keep attacking him from afar to slow him down, heavy hitters with me. We need to maximize the damage dealt while minimizing the damage taken." But that people like Kaminari Jiro and other ranged attackers started an assault on the Juggernaut from a distance, while the heavy hitters like Kirishima, All Might, Momo and Endeavor took a head-on approach and started attacking the Juggernaut who was swinging his hammer in an attempt to hit someone. Endeavor then started to grab Juggernaut's helmet and heating it up, trying to melt the helmet and knock you the Juggernaut, but it wasn't working as the helmet was too dense and was able to resist the heat throat magic, and before Endeavor could do anything he was hit in the chin by the Juggernaut with a hammer, effectively knocking him out. Meanwhile, All Might tried to grab the Juggernaut from the back and slam him, but the Juggernaut grabbed All Might's hands and flipped him over, hitting Momo and Kirishima and slammed him in the ground. Then he grabbed All Might's head with one hand and lifted him up and punched All Might the face, sending him flying into a wall, knocking him out. And then the Juggernaut just walked through the barrage of electricity and other ranged attack and grabbed Momo by the neck and slammed his fist into her stomach and threw her aside. Then he jumped in the air and landed on Momo, knocking her out cold. And then he attacked Izawa, who blocked the attack with a shield but was thrown back into a wall from the force and effectively rendered unable to fight for a few minutes. The Juggernaut moved onto the ranged attackers and swiftly took most of them out and was about to hit Mina, but Shiro pulled her out of the way with his tape and the Juggernaut tried going after her, but he felt Uraraka trying to attack him, so he jumped up and kicked her in the face and then looked at Kirishima and attacked him with his hammer. But Kirishima blocked the attack and with both his arms, but his arms started breaking. Just then Kirishima thought, only if I had more power, I could have defeated him. And as the Juggernaut was about to hit him again, the Juggernaut was pushed back by an energy beam which came from the air, and soon a person in an iron suit landed and said, "Sorry, am I late for the party?" Just then Kirishima felt relief, but was suddenly pulled into a void where he saw Sidorak and said, "Who are you, and where am I?" Sidorak then spoke, "I am the primordial being Sidorak, and I was the one who gave the Juggernaut his unstoppable power under the condition he only uses my power. But he is now using someone else's power and I can't have that, so I brought you here. You will take that power and defeat him." Kirishima thought about this and said, "Yes, I will do it." Sidorak then said, "Good, you can do whatever you want with my power," and sent Kirishima out of the realm. And when Kirishima arrived, he saw a weakened Juggernaut and rushed at him with his body hardened, and seeing this the Juggernaut himself attacked Kirishima, but when both of their fists collided, there was a huge dust storm which pushed everyone back, and when the dust cleared, Kirishima and the Juggernaut were evenly matched in strength as their fists were stopped halfway. And the two were looking at each other dead in the eye, and after a few seconds they both got into a punching match, and were even, but then the armored person hit the Juggernaut in the back, which caused him to lose balance, and Kirishima punched the Juggernaut until he was unconscious. Just then everyone heard Odin's voice say, "I, Odin, king of Asgard, command you to go and help Izuku. I will take care of the injured." And everyone there went in the direction Izuku went except for Kirishima and Melissa, while the injured and unconscious people were teleported away by Odin. Melissa and Kirishima then handled the Juggernaut and restrained him, and after like a minute they heard a loud thunder strike and saw someone fly upwards outside the atmosphere. Then both of them looked at each other and said, "Let's go." With that Melissa put her helmet on and started floating in the air and flew forward while grabbing Kirishima by the armpits and flying towards the battleground. And when they reached the place they saw someone about to hit Izuku, so Melissa dropped Kirishima and fired a blast at the man. The man then said, "Odin, so you came here yourself." Just then Melissa said something that surprised the man. "I am not Odin, my name is Melissa Shield, and you sir are trespassing on this planet." The serpent then rose up and saying, "What a pesky attempt now suffer." He then charged an attack and was ready to kill them all, but as he fired the attack, everyone was teleported out of there. And when they opened their eyes they saw Odin standing there with all the people who were injured from the fight with Juggernaut, and Melissa said, "Who was that person? He knocked out Izuku like nothing happened." Odin, while healing Izuku, then said, "He is the serpent, my older brother. He wishes to rule all the 9 realms, but we can't let that happen because he is a tyrant." Aizawa then said, "Then why are we here? Shouldn't we fight him?" Odin looked at Aizawa and said, "Yes, we will. That is why my army at the new Asgard near Saturn is being prepared. That is where the last fight against the serpent will be." Melissa then shouted, "What about Earth?" Odin then looked down and said, "It's too late to save Earth. Look around, even my castle here was destroyed. It means we are not ready yet, and the Earth is a lost cause, so I am taking Izuku with us to Asgard so we can make a last stand." Izuku, who had gained conscious, said, "No, I won't go. I will fight with my friend and family right here." Odin then shouted at Izuku saying, "Silence, you are coming with us because you are the only one who can defeat the serpent." Izuku then said, "How? He is stronger and faster than me. How will I do it?" Odin then said, "It is the prophecy that my older brother will be defeated by a person who wields Mjolnir when my brother is in his final form." Izuku then said, "So we have to wait until he reaches that state and until the Earth is destroyed." Odin then said, "Yes." Izuku then angrily leapt at Odin in an attempt to punch him, but Odin grabbed him and slammed him in the ground and put his spear to his eye and said, "Listen here boy, if we survive, we can bring the Earth back." Izuku, while on the ground, reluctantly said fine. With that Odin sent Izuku away to New Asgard and looked at the others and said, "If we win we will meet again," and vanished. While every hero in Japan was there and all the major characters who could fight were there. Nezu then spoke up saying, "Listen here everyone. The country has been evacuated and a barrier has been put up around the city. This was one thing Thor gave me in case of emergency. So no enemy can leave the city. We just have to wait for the serpent to reach his final form. When that happens we will attack." Everyone said in unison, "Yes sir," and started to prepare for the battle. They were gathering equipment and other items from UA which was outside the barrier. After a while they all heard a low boom from the city and looked to see the entire city leveled, every building destroyed, and an army of monsters on the far end of the barrier. The heroes decided they will have to fight quickly. Meanwhile on Asgard, Odin spoke to Izuku saying, "Rest in this bed, this will charge you with some of the Odin force and help you in your fight." Izuku then laid down and said, "If any of my friends have a request please fulfill it." Odin then nodded and said, "I will." Time skip. A few hours later, the barrier was weakening and looked like could break any second. Seeing this, Melissa looked up and shouted, "Odin, I know you can hear me. I have a request from you." She then looked around and said he couldn't even hear it, but just then Odin said, "Who said I couldn't hear it? I hear every prayer that someone does in my name, but I don't intervene." But Izuku had asked me to fulfill any request you may have, so speak. Melissa then said, "Can I use your forgery?" Odin then leaned and looked at her and said, "Yes, you may. You look like a talented crafter, and your father and that pink-haired girl can also come." With it the four vanished, and the Melissa along with her dad and May began working OK weapons in Odin's forge to create weapons to fight the serpent and his army, because none of the heroes were about to let the serpent just take over the earth without a fight. Time skip. After the weapons were forged and distributed, the heroes were now wearing enchanted armor and using enchanted weapons and were standing just outside the barrier to enter and fight as soon as it breaks. Something like this. With each booming sound they could see the barrier beginning to crack and they all were ready to go in. And the moment the barrier broke they all ran in with all might saying chargers. Meanwhile in Asgard, Izuku woke up from his sleep and looked around and soon he heard Odin speak, "It's time," and held a sword in his hand. And said a blade forged to end all things. A warning, a promise. This is as big as anything the Odin's word whose name is Ragnarok. He can die. That is all that matters. He can be killed with this now take it and go finish him off. He has transformed at last I will bring my army to support you. Izuku then quickly grabbed the sword and his hammer and saw armor Odin had for him and also wore it saying, "This is it," and he flew out of Asgard and towards the battlefield where the serpent had transformed into his final form. The heroes were fighting the army and suddenly everyone heard a loud boom as they saw Izuku flying towards them while shouting, "Serpent. The time for our prophecy is at hand," and the serpent while crushing a building said indeed. Meanwhile in Asgard, Odin ordered his army saying march to Midgard to fight and slaughter. Chapter 18, The Battle to End All Battles. Izuku was flying directly at the serpent yelling come on, and the serpent reacted accordingly and rushed at Izuku trying to hit him, but Izuku went under his attack and cut his small arms a little, and then flew around the serpent and hit him with thunder, causing the serpent to yell out in anger and pain. Every here seeing this were filled with hope that they could win. And started fighting even more harder. Izuku after hitting the serpent with thunder flew towards his chest and used the sword to cut the Sentai chest vertically. For those who don't understand it, means he stabbed his chest and then pulled the sword down until he got to the end. The strike was strong but not fatal. Seeing the serpent on the back foot Shigaraki rushed at Izuku and hit him in the back before he could anything knocking Izuku down to the ground and was about to finish him off saying, "You will pay for your father's crime." But before he could hit Izuku's head with his hammer, a blast was fired through his chest, killing him. As Shigaraki fell to the side Izuku looked up to see Melissa in her destroyer armor. And said, "You're a lifesaver." Melissa just smiled and said, "I know, but can you help us for a second? That guy there has a quirk, which allows him to control the weather. Deal with him quickly." Izuku looking at Nine said, "I am the god of thunder, that is my job, let me take it back." Saying this Izuku flew towards Nine and yelled, "Hey phony." Hearing this Nine turned around and swung his hammer at Izuku, but Izuku hit it with his own and then stabbed Nine in the heart saying, "I am the one who controls the weather." And then Izuku flew back towards the serpent and just as he got near him, he was hit in the face by a hammer which knocked Izuku's hammer out of his hand and making it fall far away, and as Izuku stumbled onto his feet, he saw Dabi standing over him and said, "You." Dabi just said yes. Me and fired a fireball at Izuku, but the blast was blocked by another burst of fire whose source revealed itself being Endeavor. Izuku looked at Endeavor and said, "Uncle, Enji this is," but he was cut off by Endeavor who said, "I know it is Tuia, I recognized him the moment I saw him," and he then looked at Dabi and said, "Son please surrender, that way you can survive." But Dabi just laughed like a madman and said, "Oh don't worry, I will be alive at the end, but can't say the same about you." Dabi then started charging up his flames and seeing this Endeavor did the same and said sorry, and the heat coming from both of them were so intense that the ground started to melt, and after a minute they rushed at each other, and Endeavor opened his palm and hit Dabi in the chest with his palm, while Dabi shot a lot of fire at Endeavor's left eye. Dabi managed to damage Endeavor's left eye, but in return this happened to him. And he was dead. Seeing this Izuku saw how much of a hero Endeavor was willing to kill his own son to save others. But Izuku shook his head and looked at the serpent and saw Odin was fighting him, and so Izuku decided to run at the serpent. Meanwhile the heroes were starting to get overwhelmed as many of the villains were too strong for normal heroes. Mirio was fighting villains left and right and helping others until he heard a loud bang behind him and turned around to see an old man falling towards him. Mirio seeing this decided to help him out and caught him, but ended up getting hurt a bit. And when he stood up he said, "Are you okay sir?" The old man stood up and said, "I'm fine kid, are you okay?" Mirio said, "Yes, I'm fine." Odin then looked behind Mirio and said, "Kid pick it up and rally everyone, they need to be motivated." Mirio looked behind him and saw Mjolnir and then looked at Odin and said, "I pick it." Odin just nodded and Mirio walked over to the hammer and stretched his hand and then lifted the hammer up and shouted, "Everyone assemble." Everyone on the battlefield heard it and looked at Mirio. The heroes then saw that the villains were distracted and attacked them, turning the tide of the war. And the serpent just shouted Nuo, but was cut off by a slash to his right eye, which came from Izuku. Seeing this the serpent leapt at Izuku, and because Izuku couldn't fly the serpent caught him and bit him. One of his fangs had impaled Izuku in the chest, and his skin was turning blue due to the venom, and it looked like he was about to die until Mjolnir was thrown and broke the serpent's jaw. Freeing Izuku as Izuku was falling, All Might caught him and said, "Son, are you okay?" Izuku just panted and grunted saying, "Throw me towards him." All Might wanted to protest, but Izuku said, "Please." Hearing this, All Might threw Izuku at the serpent who was still recovering, and while in the air Izuku held the sword upside down and grabbed it with hands and lifted it above his head, and as he reached the serpent he yelled "Ah" and stabbed the serpent in the forehead, releasing a massive energy wave. This was it, the final blow in the fight. With this, Izuku had won. And the blast which came from this threw Izuku away, and all the minions of the serpent started fading away. Meanwhile, All Might ran towards where Izuku fell, and a crowd was formed around Izuku, who had a large fang in his stomach and was crawling. All Might ran towards his son and hugged him saying, "Izuku, Izuku my boy, please say something." But Izuku only raised his hand, which All Might grabbed and said, "I guess this is it." And All Might looked at him and said, "No, don't worry, you will come back, please don't go, please." All Might was now crying heavily, and Momo also reached Izuku and fell to her knees. Seeing him in this condition, Izuku weakly looks at her and said, "I love you, Momo," and closed his eyes, and his head fell to the side along with his hand. All Might saw this and looked at Odin and said, "You can bring him back, right?" Odin looked at All Might and said, "No, I can bring back a god and a human from the dead, but a demigod cannot come back." All Might hearing this dropped to his knees and was started crying. Meanwhile at door of Valhalla, Izuku looked at it and said, "Well, I enjoyed life as it was, now I have to move on." He then took a step forward, but before he could enter, someone stopped him, putting his hand on Izuku's chest. It was none other than Thor, who looked at the boy with proud eyes and said, Now, no need to hurry, you still have a lot to live for, now go back and goodbye." Midoriya, he then pushed Izuku back as Izuku realized what Thor did and yelled Thor, and saw Thor fading away with a smile. Then Izuku woke up in the battlefield and everyone looked at him in shock, and All Might and Momo ran and hugged him. Meanwhile, Odin looked at the sky and said, "Farewell, son." Meanwhile, everyone cheated on for victory. Let me know in the comments below if you guys want the next part. Also check out my other video that has been shown and left. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please like and share this video. And have a fantastic day. Bye.